If I can pull it down before it gets ponytail head. I'm pretty sure I have Wi-Fi.
Usually you can tell by the way your eyes feel.
If they don't feel like they're pulled too far into the back of my head.
Thank you. Can you hear me? All right. So welcome, everybody. It's great to have you all here. I know a large number of you were here this afternoon. Put your hands up if you were here this afternoon. Okay, good. So you're scattered throughout the audience. That's fantastic. So I'm really happy to have you all here tonight to hear Lori Ciafardoni, right? Did I say that correct?
Close enough.
Okay, all right. And Lori is here tonight. She is going to be speaking to you on the topic of common healthcare issues for individuals who are lesbian, gay, and bisexual and transgender health. And this afternoon, she gave a workshop to primarily our students. There are a few juniors who are here, and I think you all enjoyed it, right? Yeah. I think a few people just told me this is the best O'Connor chair that we have seen. So
incredibly sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
It's because I bought Skittles. Let's be honest. It was about the Skittles.
So Lori comes to us from SUNY Delhi, where she's a full-time assistant professor in their RN mobility program. She also teaches as an adjunct faculty member in the Graduate School of Management at the Sage Colleges over in Albany. She has an area of expertise in LGBT healthcare, ethics, research, health assessment, community health, and analytical methods. She is a community health, population health person, I think, heart and soul, loves research, and is really happy, I think, to be here with us this evening. You students who are the future of our healthcare system. They're right now in the healthcare system, so that you begin to think about how it is that you, as instruments of change, begin to change things for this population. So without further ado, I hand this over to our lovely O'Connor Chair lecturer. Thank you.
All right. So, thanks, Ray. So for anyone who is here this afternoon, thank you so much. I think we had an awesome workshop. I loved that you paid so much attention and that you were so invested in this topic because it is incredibly important. As you heard, I'm Lori Ciafardoni. I teach down the road, sort of, in the remote program, so I actually get to teach from the comfort of my home, which is great. And I love talking to nursing students. I was a teacher before I was a nurse, and now I kind of get to do it all, and it really is the best of both worlds for me. I did women's health obstetrical high-risk OB nursing for 15 years and sort of fell in love with this population for a myriad of reasons that we'll talk about throughout my presentation. But we talk a lot about population health, talk a lot about health disparities and where healthcare is going. And our goal, as many of you, has anyone not done clinical yet? Super. So you all know our goal, even though you do most of your clinicals in the hospital, is to keep our patients out of the hospital, keep them in the community. So this is a population, this is something that we're going to talk about. And we're talking a lot. I noticed a lot of my seniors have moved back. You're afraid I'm going to pick on you again. I'm not calling on anybody today. Matt, you could not be any further in the back unless you were in the parking lot. Matt was one of my main guinea pigs this afternoon. So Matt is basically 2 rows from the exit. So just a couple of housekeeping rules while we're here. You're being live streamed and taped. So this is broadcasting on YouTube on the Hartwick College site. Feel free, if your phones are out now, to silence them, please. And if you want, you can Twitter it. It is my Twitter account, Nurse Girl, not a typo, GRRL1, and Hartwick College both have Twitter accounts. Feel free, if you'd like to, take 30 seconds while you silence your phone and blow up someone. Know you're here, let them know what an important topic this is, let them know how much your college rocks, because this is a really important topic that not a lot of people are talking about. It's pretty progressive, and I'm super happy to be here and talking about it. So silence your phones, if you would, please. Instagram photos. Feel free to take our picture. Take your own pictures. Some of you are graduating shortly. Take a group photo. Take a selfie. Doesn't matter. However, if you want to do it, go ahead and post it to my Instagram account. Post it to Hartwick. If Hartwick doesn't have rules about that, post it to your Facebook account. Put it out there. Let people know you're here. You're doing some pretty important stuff tonight. So, a couple of things. What does LGBT stand for? We're going to talk tonight about LGBT healthcare with the main focus of this conversation for the next 90 minutes being on transgender health. Because as we talked about this afternoon, There's not a ton of differences in healthcare for your lesbian, gay, and bisexual population. There are some that you need to know about. We talked a lot this afternoon about how we interact with this population, what the cultural competency piece is, and how we provide culturally competent care to this population. So when we talk about lesbians, it's a pretty simple definition. Lesbians are women who choose to partner with women. Okay? We don't mean business partnership. We're not talking about going and starting a store. We're talking about intimate partnering. Okay? We talk about gay. We usually talk about gay men. Okay? Men that choose to partner with men. This is all pretty simple and easy to follow along so far. Bisexual gets a little more complicated. Because bi, as we know, since we're nurses, we know a lot about Latin. Bi means how many? 2. Right. So we would partner with men and or women. Okay? It's not one or the other. So when we talk about the umbrella, and we all hear about LGBT. Was there anyone who hadn't heard about LGBT before you walked in here or before you found out you had to come here tonight? Right. So we all have heard about it, but we not have all explored it. So the first 3 things in my afternoon class, seniors, don't answer this because you were here and you knew the answer. So anybody who wasn't here this afternoon, can you tell me what the difference is between sexual and the transgender population? Yes? That was not. Yes. Anything for another pack of Skittles. Okay, so let's try anyone who was not here this afternoon. Junior, sophomore, freshman, outside people. Anyone? Yes?
LGBT normally are cisgender, meaning they identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth. Transgender identify with the opposite gender that they were assigned at birth.
Ish. So yes, sort of. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual have to do with sexual orientation. Who you are attracted to, who you choose to partner with. Transgender is strictly gender. And so are you in the body that you were assigned at birth? Do you feel comfortable in that body? Do you identify in that gender? So the first thing has to do with sexual orientation. The last one has to do with gender. So much so that we've even put it in the name so you don't forget. Okay? Does that make sense? So say it with me. The first thing have to do with?
Sexual orientation.
All of you who were here this afternoon, thank you. And the last? Gender identity, okay? It's important to know the difference, not just for yourself, but for your clients. Because while you aren't completely wrong with your definition, as a transgender individual, I may be born female. I may transition to male, okay? Chaz Bono is a perfect example. Chaz Bono shares daughter, born daughter, now son. Chastity Bono became Chaz Bono several years ago, went through sexual reassignment surgery. He chooses now to partner with women because he identifies as a straight male. That is his gender and his sexual orientation. Some people choose, as a transgender individual, to partner with members of the same sex as well. Okay, so one is sexual orientation, one is gender. That's sort of the big difference there. We talked this afternoon because when we think about how did the transgender population end up there, because they're really 2 very separate things, by and large, wasn't a lot of places to put the transgender population when we think about populations. They couldn't really hang out by themselves. We don't really like to do that a lot in a very small group like these are. We don't have a lot of data on the trans population, but we do know that it's smaller than the LGB combined. But we put them together because it seemed to sort of make sense because, as we found, a lot of our transgender individuals had identified as lesbian or gay at some point previously in their process. Although we are seeing now, and I'm sure you've seen it because Oprah had a special on it, we are seeing younger and younger identification of gender from their assigned birth. So that being said, I'm going to cue up a video, and I'm going to hope that we don't have the technical difficulties that we did this morning. So for those of you that were here, I apologize. We are going to show Eric's story again. So this morning, on my drive here, I was, yeah, you can cry again, somewhere on my drive in on Route maybe 88, I've decided. I got a text message from a friend of mine back in Boston. She said, listen, just got this video. A friend of mine's son transitioned. I think it's pretty relevant in the eyes of what you're presenting this afternoon and tonight. Take a look at it. Feel free to share it. He's all about getting the word out. So I reached out to Eric and his family, who I didn't know, and said, do I have permission to show your video? He and his dad both got back in touch with me and said, feel free to show the video. We're all about you getting it out on social media and sharing his story. So what I know about Eric, and Eric, if you're live streaming, thank you. It's an amazing video. Is that Eric is a college student in Massachusetts. He had to do a graphic design project. And so for his 6-minute graphic design video project, he sort of did his story in 6 minutes. It is an incredibly moving video, so much so that while I was on the side of the road watching it on my way here, deciding whether it was something I could use this afternoon or tonight, it moved me so much, and this is a topic that has been ingrained in my life for it put me in tears. It really moved a lot of people this afternoon. I'm happy, and then I'd love to actually have some dialogue about it and sort of the impact and the statement that it makes as we sort of move into sort of what this means for people. So, Lord willing, we will have perhaps a 6-minute video. It is Vimeo, so it will take a couple of minutes. Hey, Ray, when it comes up, can we shut the lights again?
Know what happened?
I don't even know what that noise was.
In this day and age, we never run out of things to think about. There's constant white noise and stress in our lives. But what happens if we think about the little things in life so much we forget the bigger picture? Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all." So my question is, how do we find ourselves again if we get lost somewhere along the way? I believe the answer lies in something else Soren wrote. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. My name's Eric. I'm 19 years old, I'm a student in college, and I lost myself along the way. But I found myself by looking back. So let's start at the beginning. I was born in 19 parents Tim and Karen. I have a brother. His name's Matt. My childhood was just like anyone else's. But there's a difference now, which makes it harder to understand. When I look back, sure, I see myself, but as a different gender. I grew up as her. I wore dresses. But I can still see myself in her. Because she's me. And looking back, I can see the struggle I didn't have a name for, and see that it was justified. The times when I stuck out from my peers, I didn't care, because I was being me. It was only as I got older that the pressures got stronger for me to conform to society's expectations of what they thought a young woman should be. I started pretending to be her all the time. I let myself disappear quietly. I goes on to write, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." That despair found me and rooted itself deeply. By the time I was 16, I had lost almost all of what made me me. It was at that time that I realized I was transgender. And to be me, I would have to remember all that I once was. I had a lot of work to do to be myself again. I started simply by changing my name. Then I changed the hormones that ran through my veins. Finally, I removed the breasts that had always been foreign to me. Somewhere along the way, my brother shared with me another quote, philosopher, Martin Heidegger. I used it in my high school graduation speech. What he says is simple yet powerful. Become who you are. This quote means so much to me that I have it tattooed on my body forever. It suggests that you will never officially be who you are because the state of being yourself is constantly changing. You're always becoming who you are. In truth, the greatest hazard of all, in losing oneself, is only you know you've lost. So if you choose to quietly focus on the little things in life, and forget the bigger picture, then it will be as if becoming who you are is nothing at all.
Thanks, Ray. See, this exact reaction we had this afternoon. Pretty moving stuff, right? I pretty much want to take Eric and his family out every time I speak about this topic now, and I don't know them, but I kind of want them to be part of when I travel. It's an amazing capture of what a lot of our patients who decide to transition go through. It is never an easy choice. It is one, as you saw with Eric, that was a pretty big struggle, it sounds like, from the get-go, from pretty young. And not everybody is as fortunate as he is to have the support of a family and sibling community. And so we see a lot of issues that are specific to this population because of that. Okay, so when we think about this, you know, as much as there are struggles with the lesbian, gay, and bisexual population, transgender population has it a little different. And we talked this afternoon, in some regards they come out twice. A lot of times they identify as lesbian or gay first. And coming out to your friends and family and running the risk of what that actually means and entails. And then to have to do it again at some point about your gender can be challenging for some of our patients. So we think about this. We're going to talk a lot about transgender. And at the end I will take questions, and I will enter questions about anything on that spectrum. But tonight we're going to focus a lot on the trans community. So a number of these words, especially now that Bruce Jenner is transitioning. Chastity Barno transitioned to Chaz. Anybody watch Orange is the New Black? Laverne Cox, who plays Sophia on that show, is doing amazing things for this community because this is one of the first roles where there's an actual transgender actress portraying a transgender as opposed to a straight actress playing a transgender individual. So it's a big deal. So a lot of things that you'll see there's a lot of things under that umbrella up there. Female or male, you'll see FTM abbreviated a lot sometimes in literature. Talking about gender identity, gender presentation. So we talked this afternoon a lot about assumptions. We make assumptions about people based on how they look, based on how they walk into a room, when we look at our patients, or based on what we're told a patient looks like. We make a lot of assumptions sometimes, even though we don't mean to. We are the future of healthcare. We are supposed to be, I talked this afternoon, we are supposed to be Switzerland. We are supposed to be incredibly neutral and walk in. But when we think from a sociological standpoint, we have belief systems that were part of how we were raised. Okay? I told them this afternoon, I had Crest toothpaste for 20 years of my life because that was what my mom bought. And so that's when I started buying toothpaste. I bought Crest because that's what mom always bought. Kleenex, Q-tips. Think about the brands that you use. Something as simple as what you grew up with, or your political party affiliation, or the church that you go to. Those are all things that are part of our culture, part of our society, part of our own belief system. So sometimes we need to challenge those beliefs and see how we feel when we're taking care of certain patient populations. So when we think about that, we have to kind of emphasis, because you know the least amount about are the things that scare you the most, and sometimes we don't do as well as we could or should in those situations. Male to female is exactly what it sounds like, and then you may hear abbreviations like trans, transgender, transsexual, transvestite, transition. These all have to do with trans. You'll notice that I have not put up any of the sort of negative words that come along with this. We had a conversation with some of your faculty earlier about some of the words that really kind of make us cringe. And I put none of them up here because We shouldn't be using them. We should be developing a better vocabulary to treat our patients with some dignity. So anybody think of anything else we can add to any of these 30-something words that help define what's going on with trans? How many of you knew about transgender health before you walked in here tonight that weren't here this afternoon? Right, that weren't here this afternoon. Right, some of you, okay? It is not studied well. There's not a lot of research out there. We to help this community. We talked this afternoon. So I'm going to give you a little statistic. There's Skittles up for grabs. Those of you that were here this afternoon cannot answer, because you know the answer. Orchard Skittles now. We're moving up the food chain of Skittles. So there are 1,300 federally recognized healthcare centers in this country with 8,000 sites. Okay, so 8,000 healthcare clinics in the U.S. and Puerto Rico. Okay, so think about that. It's a lot, right? 8,000. Okay, that services 21.7 million people in the U.S. That's data from this year. How many LGBT healthcare centers are there in the U.S.? And you can raise hands. 0 is not the answer. Anyone else? 15 is the closest. The answer is 14. 14 LGBT healthcare centers in the United States. Thank you. Skittles this afternoon got it right on the nose up back. She got 14 as a lucky guess. So, 14 LGBT health centers spanning 7 states. Anyone from this morning remember what they were?
New York, California, Massachusetts, Georgia.
Right, Georgia. So Georgia and Texas are our 2 big wild cards. So California has 2 of them. Georgia, Maryland, New York has 3, Massachusetts has 2. The 3 in New York are in the city, downstate. Philly, Texas. The one in Florida closed, that's why I didn't make the list anymore. So 14. So if you happen to live, Arkansas was my state of choice this afternoon. If you live in Arkansas, there is no LGBT designated facility where you live. So where do you get your care if you're transgender? We are very fortunate in New York State to have 2 really well-known centers downstate. You can be there in a couple of hours. Sort of. That's a lot to go for care. If you get sick, you go down the street to Bassett. Now, I'm going to share my interesting little bit of trivia about owning on to New York. Anybody, is it Susquehanna? Susquehanna Family Health Center. Anybody know where it is? They have a gender wellness center here in Oneonta, New York, which is awesome because they are providing service to the transgender population that they cannot get otherwise here in central New York. It is amazing. They do everything except for sexual reassignment surgery, but they will make referrals. They will do counseling. They will do hormones. They will do primary care. That is an amazing thing, and every single one of you should send them a thank you note for existing because that is awesome, whether you use their services or not, because they are providing a so desperately needed service out here. And they have grown. In the 3 years that I've been working out here presenting on this topic in New York, I'm a Boston transplant, they have grown exponentially, which is awesome. Even now in Albany, which is the state capital, there is no transgender health services there that are exclusively for transgender clients in the way that they are out here. So all of our clients in Albany come out here now. So it's amazing, and we're incredibly thankful that that exists. So we talk about issues, and we gave away Skittles earlier today because we talked about the #1 killer in the United States is heart disease. Heart disease doesn't care who you partner with. Heart disease doesn't care what your gender is, as you've all learned. Heart disease is the #1 killer in this country. So it's a physical issue. So we talked earlier about what's the difference. Like a lesbian patient is really just a woman who chooses to partner with other women. But we learned differently about that this afternoon. So I'll share with you what we talked about. The more risk factors that a woman has, just like any modifiable behavior, the more risk factors you have, gay, lesbian, straight, bisexual, transgender, heart disease is going to find you. So the more comorbidities you have to go with that, the higher your risk is of dying from heart disease. Make sense? Sounds like something you might have learned in health assessment or med-surg or Rings a bell? I'm sure you have a $300 textbook that talks about it in like 2 whole chapters, okay? So, factors that raise a women's risk for heart disease, what are they? Smoking. What else? Obesity. Physical inactivity. All of these have been found to be more prevalent in the lesbian population. So now we've just added a bunch of comorbidities because of a lifestyle choice, because of orientation, that exponentially raises the heart disease for lesbian, gays, and bisexuals. Same thing with cancer. Lesbians are significantly higher at risk for developing breast cancer. There's stress. They have fewer full-term pregnancies. If you think about women who partner with women, not all of them are having babies, although we're seeing more and more of it. But when you get an insurance company that won't pay for your fertility treatments, hardly any lesbian ever just wakes up accidentally pregnant one morning. There's usually a lot of time and planning that goes into that. And there's usually a lot of money that goes into it as well, because there is something in most insurance clauses that are exclusion criteria. And we're going to talk about that with the transgender population, but sometimes when you talk about infertility, Blue Cross Blue Shield is one of them that will tell lesbian couples, because you, and this is a quote from a letter that I owned, because you choose to not be exposed to sperm, we will not cover your fertility treatments. So think about that for a minute. Because you choose to not be exposed to sperm, in writing, on letterhead. So your insurance companies are doing, right, so just, yeah, it's sort of fun to think about that. So they're less likely to bear children, so they're more at risk for breast cancer. When you look at the data that shows that if you have a provider that you don't feel comfortable with, you're less likely to go and have your annual screenings done. We know how important mammograms are. We know how important they are in prevention when we think about primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. We know how important screenings are for a number of things that are up here, right? Yes? Yes, Lori, we do. It's super important to be screened. So, it's a big deal that this population gets seen. So we talked this, if you had to go to your healthcare provider, and you had to talk to your healthcare provider about what you thought was a hot appy. Your appendix is blowing up, but you have to go to your healthcare provider and teach them about appendicitis, and teach them how to remove your appendix, and take care of you postoperatively. That doesn't make me want to run to the doctor. I want my doctor to know what is going on with me and treat it. So we talked a little bit about healthcare curriculum. On average, I might have more Skittles for this one. Okay, on average, not warning people. On average, does anyone know what the average medical school curriculum is for the LGBT population, HIV and women's health excluded, because they usually have their own modules?
Like how many classes?
How many hours? How many hours in medical school do medical providers have on LGBT healthcare topics outside of HIV and women's health?
3, 2, 1.
I would love it if they had 20. On average, they have 4. 4 hours. I've spent more time with that, with you talking about, not that. Who said 5? Because you, what did you say?
I said 3. I said 5.
Split it with her. So these are the people that we're trusting to take care of us. So I went on a bit of a tangent this afternoon. You are the future of this population's health care. Okay, well, I don't expect you all to run out and be LGBT healthcare practitioners. It is important to sort of keep in the back of your mind how we take care of these patients and what we know. You only know what you know, right? You can't know everything. You will learn that as you start to study for your boards. You can't possibly know everything. Okay, lots of textbooks, lots of index cards, lots of information in 4 years. You don't know everything about everything. I've done high-risk OB for 15 years. I don't know that I would be successful in passing my boards again, because there was a lot of information on there that is outside of my wheelhouse of expertise. I have never once set foot on a medical surgical floor once I graduated nursing school, except to visit people that were sick. So I've never been a med-surg nurse. So please don't ask me about sick people, because I'm not great at it. So you can't know everything about everything. But if we have a couple of people that are really good about this stuff, it makes a difference and it makes an impact. Okay? Does that make sense? As nurses, if every nurse in this country unified and had one solid voice, you would be the most powerful union in the country. You can make amazing things happen. You can make amazing, effective change. So when we talked earlier in the introduction about being change agents, and you hear it, it's a buzzword. You do truly have the potential to affect change. And you think, oh gosh, I don't know that we could affect change. Like, we're not even out of school yet. We just want to get through this semester. We're here on a Thursday and it was 90 out today. Thanks so much. You have the potential to be the future for these patients. For patients like Eric, who's 19, who went and had surgery, okay, you saw pictures of him in the hospital. I will tell you from experience, that is not an easy surgery. So think about any patient that you've taken care of that's had a mastectomy for whatever reason. When transgender patients choose to remove their breasts, it is a bilateral mastectomy. You saw his scars. Incredibly brave individual for sharing his pictures with us. Scars, you don't see those a lot, okay? They're big scars. That is not something that was not a surgery filled with significant effort and a painful recovery. It is not a laparoscopic gallbladder removal, okay? These patients go through big things to become the people that they need to be. And for a lot of these patients, this is not a choice, okay? There's been a lot of talk about Bruce Jenner lately. Who saw the Bruce Jenner interview? Been a lot of dialogue about whether or not Bruce has lost his mind. He's a Kardashian, so we're all going to talk about it, of course. But is it a phase? Is it not a phase? What's he doing? It's good and bad. He's a Kardashian, so I don't really want to talk about it. He's giving my topic of interest an amazing platform for people to have conversations. And I feel like it's sort of like any sort of advertising is good advertising even when it's bad. So it's going to stimulate conversation. And it's hopefully going to cause practitioners to sort of perk up and be like, oh, this is a population we need to start paying a little more attention to. With me so far? Yes. So fitness and obesity. Okay, we talked a little bit about that as a modifiable behavior. So we know that the data shows us that lesbians and bisexual women tend to not work out as much and are at higher risk for obesity. The opposite end of that is with gay men. So it's an interesting thing. Gay men tend to be really fixated from the data. This is data, not opinion. On personal image, so much so that they almost run to the opposite end of extremity with that, with anorexia and bulimia. So not too different from the general population when we think about how great somebody thinks they need to look and sort of how that can actually affect them and impact them. Injury and violence is huge, and we're going to talk about some numbers with the transgender population. You've seen it in the news. You've seen gay bashing. You've seen some public policy get put into place to protect this population. There's not enough of it. There are still states where you can go and you can absolutely be assaulted for being different in one of these categories, and it's not a big deal and nobody's going to jail. It's something we need to pay better attention to, but their incidence for injury and violence is exponentially larger than the general population. Sexual health and STIs, and we talk about it a lot. I'm not going to talk about HIV because it really truly is its own topic and deserves its own conversation. It is still a problem in 2015. We definitely have a much better handle on it than we did 20 years ago. When I was an undergrad nursing student, my senior thesis was on the HIV threat to the funeral home director. So I thought if I wrote about something nobody knew anything about, I'd probably get an A. And I did, but I got an A because back in 1998, there were still funeral home directors that were refusing to pick up and transport and embalm HIV-positive patients. 1998 wasn't that long ago. All of you were born by then, yes? So in your lifetime, this has happened. So it's kind of a big deal, okay? So we have to think about that. We've done a good job with it. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of funding, and people are incredibly aware about it. But it is still a problem that impacts this community, and definitely men who choose to partner with men, sort of more so than anybody else in this population. So, 3 things we can't really ignore. The mental health, suicide, and substance abuse issues in this population, also pretty significant and more so than the general population, okay? Parents have had a really hard time sometimes with their kids coming out. Again, we're just talking about here, orientation, not gender, okay? So, there have been pretty well documented studies on children, adolescents. Who did their adolescent LGBT paper? Somebody here? Ish. So there's some pretty significant data out there that younger and younger, we're having more children identifying in their chosen identity, but we're seeing bigger issues. The mental health piece is huge. Depression, huge. Suicide, really big. Suicide attempts as well. You can't be on any network these days and not see another trans life. I'll talk about the trans population in depth with these numbers in a second. But there are suicide attempts with the LGBT community as well. Think about, we did an exercise this afternoon. Think about if where we live right now, the data shows us that 90% of the US population is straight, heterosexual, 10% is not, and falls somewhere on the LGBT spectrum. Imagine if it was reversed. So imagine if we lived in Queerville. And so being straight was the outcasting thing. And every part of your day you had to decide how you functioned in that society where being gay and openly gay and transgender was acceptable, and you're being straight and partnering with your opposite gender partner was dangerous and risky and could cause isolation from your parents or your friends or your job. How does that impact you? Think about that. You know, some people really do not have, Eric is very fortunate to have a supportive family, and I don't know them, but I can only sort of ascertain from the correspondence with his dad this afternoon and them being in the video that they're incredibly supportive. He's almost a unicorn in that regard. It almost doesn't exist. That is not the norm in this transgender population, unfortunately. Some significantly higher in this population. When you think about coping skills, sometimes you lose them when all of that gets really big. So what are the things, when we think about general population in our healthcare system, what do we see when people sort of lose their coping skills? What do they generally turn to? It's up there. Right, substance abuse of some sort. So alcohol, tobacco, illegal drug use, all of that falls into that category. So when we're assessing our clients, we really sort of need to really look at this and take that into consideration. So we talked this afternoon about how we assess our clients and how we make sure that we're asking the right questions. So we're not just asking, are you in a relationship? We're asking who you choose to partner with. And we're asking how you choose to identify so that we can start to sort of help work through these things in a safe environment as healthcare providers. You will all have licenses one day. You will all be responsible for other people on a very regular basis. Inherently, that's why you went into health. I know it's scary, isn't it, when you think about it? At the end of the day, you're responsible for somebody. But this is an important population that needs people to take really good care of them. My goal one day is that I have educated everybody in the community, has become so good at LGBT healthcare that I don't have to go out and talk about it anymore because it's as common as talking about how to have a baby or how to have a pediatric situation or how to get seen in the emergency department. It'd be great if I didn't have to do talks about this because this population functioned just like everybody else and everybody had equal education and could take care of these patients in a competent way. It's a good plan, right? I can go back to catching babies any day. So transgender health 411. So we're going to learn a little bit about transgender health. So I'm going to tell you about Robert Eads. So Robert Eads, female to male. If you ever want to watch a documentary about trans health, you're going to want to write down the word Southern Comfort, like the drink. That'll help you remember it. Robert Eads is a gentleman. You can see his age. He was how old when he passed away? Come on, mathletes. Anyone? My God, do I have to offer Skittles for this one? This one's easy math. Okay, so Robert Eads was an identified female to male. Robert lived in Georgia, born female, waited until his 40s to transition. He was married, he had a wife, he had children. He reports that it was the absolute worst pregnancy ever because he felt like it was incredibly weird for him living in what he identified as a male body, having children, born female. He lived in Florida when he transitioned, got sick, late 40s, early 50s, because they had advised him, because of some other medical complexities, not to have complete sexual reassignment surgery. He did not undergo lower sexual reassignment surgery. So as somebody that was born female, transitioned to male, Robert still had all of his original hardware from being born a girl. Everybody follow me from an anatomical place? We're good. Okay. Robert developed some abdominal pain, some vaginal bleeding. Went and got seen, diagnosed with ovarian cancer. living fully as a male on hormones at this point, okay? In the South, in the 90s. Over 12 licensed healthcare professionals refused to treat him on the basis of what having someone like Robert in their practice would do to their practice. 12 providers refused to see him. By the time he went back to Georgia, and Georgia Medical College picked him up as a patient, he had started making the documentary. It was 1998. He was dead within a year because his cancer was so advanced. There was nothing they could do for him. Not because he didn't have insurance, not because he was so sick, because he spent that long trying to find providers that would care for him because of his gender. So think about that. Imagine having to go down the street because you don't feel good, student health services, and you walk in and because you're blonde, they say, oh, yeah, we can't see you, Fox. And you go to Fox, blonde, we can't see you because there's a lot of blondes, so no offense. There's a lot of you. So imagine if all of you that are blonde tried to go get care and couldn't. Where would you go? 12 different places. By that point, how sick are you? When there's 12 places that because of how your appearance may impact their practice, you can't get care. In 1998. That's not that long ago. Okay? So Robert's story is amazing. Southern Comfort is a documentary. It chronologues this story. And unfortunately, he died before it was completed. So you will see dialogue from his friends and family that sort of finished out that documentary. Bruce Jenner, as we talked about, Bruce has now been added to my PowerPoint slide because Bruce, everyone knows Bruce Jenner. Bruce is on the cover, somebody was saying earlier, he's on the cover of every tabloid right now in the checkout at the supermarket. Really bad picture. But there's a lot of dialogue that's being generated, and I wish him all the best because it sounds like Bruce tried to make this transition in the 80s. And when you think back, you weren't born then, most of you, Bruce Jenner was on a Wheaties package. Back when being on a Wheaties package was like the thing if you were an athlete. And Bruce was an amazing athlete. So think about how everybody views you. You are the quintessential male in the United States. You are an Olympic athlete. You're ridiculous at what you do. We've put you on a Wheaties box. And you want to be a girl. So Bruce went on hormones in the 80s and was really counseled not to make that transition because of who he was in society at that point. Chaz Bono we've talked about. Now, for anyone that knows anything about gay men, it is not really a stereotype. They love their Cher. They love them some Cher. So when Cher's baby girl decided to be a boy, everybody got on board that because it was Cher, and Cher came out and said, I totally support you. I support your decision to transition. So Chaz had it a lot easier and has spoken out and said that very publicly, that had I not been availed the privilege of being who I am, I would not have been able to make this transition as easily as I did. And Laverne Cox, as we talked about, is doing amazing things on Orange is the New Black and is really out and very active in the community and has been for a long time and is really doing amazing things for this trans community. So the four big things when we think about the issues with trans health care are these four. Access to care, which we've talked about, 14 centers, and Susquehanna family down the street. Discrimination, which we've talked a little bit about. Lack of services, which sort of ties into not actually having a place to go. And provider lack of knowledge, because we don't have a ton of providers that are really well versed in this population. When we think about access to care, and we talk a lot about that with the ACA, we've all learned about the ACA, yes? The Affordable Care Act. So all of our patients have insurance in theory. Yes, Lori, the president signed it into effect a couple years ago. It's not working as well as we'd hoped. But we think about access to care. Do you have insurance? So I asked earlier, who's married here? Raise your hand. Do you have insurance for you and your partner through your employer? If you wanted to, could you get it? Yes. That is a privilege that not every state and every individual have. Okay? If you live in a state, say Georgia, where same-sex marriage is not recognized, you don't get health insurance from your partner who you're married to, either in a state like New York that recognizes same-sex marriage or otherwise, Because as far as the state of Georgia is concerned, you're not married. Okay? So there's been a lot of policy around that lately. Last week there were Senate hearings on same-sex marriage. We're hoping to pass it federally, because quite frankly, who cares who you're married to? 50% of all marriages end in divorce. If you don't believe in gay marriage, don't marry a gay person. That's what I say. So everybody else, marry who you want. If it's consensual, have at it. But access to care is a big deal, because if you don't have insurance and you need care, I'll tell you right now, and most of you are either on your parents' insurance or student health services insurance here, healthcare is really expensive. Okay? A good portion of your paycheck in a few amount of time for those of you that are going to be working will go towards your health insurance in the hopes that you never need to use it. And you don't get that money back. It's preventative. So think about that. Think about not having the opportunity, and every time you go somewhere, you're paying out of pocket for routine things. This is not about sexual reassignment surgery. This is just routine stuff. It's kind of a big deal. Okay? Another thing to think about, we talked earlier this afternoon about this. I'll pick on not Matt. Is there another gentleman that is not Matt that was not here this afternoon? Anyone? He's like, please don't pick on. Okay, super. What's your name? Quinn. Quinn, your name is perfect. You couldn't have been a better person. So, Quinn clearly, stand up, Quinn, let everybody see you. Quinn clearly, I'm gonna make an assumption, Quinn was born male. I'm gonna guess, Quinn, that you identify as male on the regular. Okay, just assumptions again, okay? So let's say tomorrow, Quinn says, God, that was a really great lecture, I'm completely empowered, I would like to be a girl. I'm gonna give you Skittles after this, but just so you know, okay? So Quinn decides he wants to be a girl. Quinn doesn't have to really change his name. He has the perfect name for it. So, Quinn goes trotting off down the street to the Gender Wellness Center and says, listen, I really, for a long time I've been kind of struggling with this, and I don't think this is who I'm supposed to be. And so Quinn decides to go all out and have top-to-bottom sexual reassignment surgery. He follows something called the WPATH recommendations, which is the former Harry Benjamin standards, which has a list of recommendations for providers that say things like, you should live in your chosen gender for a year before you go on hormone therapy. It's a little gray these days. Not every provider holds you to that. So let's fast forward a year. Quinn's gone to therapy. He's talked about why he wants to be female. He thinks it's the body he was supposed to be born into. He goes and wins Mega Millions this weekend because it's $110 million. And so now he's got some free-flowing cash after a nice vacation somewhere. He goes and has his surgery. Because it costs about $60,000, top to bottom, surgery for him. So he comes back from his vacation and his surgery, and he is now presenting as female. And he goes, and now in New York, as of last month, he can get an amended birth certificate to reflect his new chosen gender. So he gets that, and then he gets his driver's license, which changes his gender marker to female. And he calls Blue Cross Blue Shield and says, hey, I might not be exposed to sperm, but gosh darn it, I'd like you to change my insurance card to say female now, and they do. So awesome. And we fast forward, and Quinn goes back to the Family Health Center down the street to get checked out for his annual exam. Well, he has now spent a lot of money to have a super. However, he still has a prostate in there because we don't take that out when we do this surgery. Okay? We don't take it out. We're putting him on hormones. We don't take the prostate out. We just give him new hardware. So now you go to your Family Health Center and you get checked out. And they're used to dealing with trans clients, so they can check you out and they bill it and they get paid for it and life is good. And then you decide you want to move to Arkansas. Lord knows why. You're going to Arkansas. Where probably there's not an LGBT healthcare center around. And Quinn, now, fully female, has to have health services again. Who's checking her prostate? And more importantly, how the heck do we bill Blue Cross Blue Shield for it now? Because everything that Quinn owns says female on it. Do we have a whole other set of, right, oh, you had the oh moment. Oh, gosh, how do we do that? We have a whole other set of problems for these patients because even when they have access, even when they have services, even when they have a provider with knowledge, and even when there's no discrimination, we still have barriers to care that we don't expect. So this is a very special population that we have to think about when we're dealing with that. When I spoke a couple years ago at the Sage College, I talked about cultural climate of inclusivity on college campuses and how to make your college campus more LGBT. We talked about things like gender-neutral bathrooms, safe spaces, that type of thing. And I talked to a group of guys from UBuffalo, and they had gone and they were going to their insurance team. They were going to say, listen, we want you to provide for our students and our faculty transgender health services. We want you to pay for them. And they did a lot of research. They literally had a binder about this big, all the data to support why their underwriter should write off this insurance. They walked into this meeting, thought they were going to be there for hours. It took about 7 minutes, they said. I was like, oh, they said no that fast. They were like, no. They said, sure. And so they said, great, we don't want you to change your mind, but can we just ask why? Like, why you just said yes so quickly? And they said, because dollar for dollar, it will cost them significantly more to pay for smoking cessation on that college campus for faculty and students than it would ever pay for them to have the students that are taking advantage of sexual reassignment surgery and transgender health services. It is not a money issue, as much as people make it out to be a money issue. So we have to think about what happens then. If it's not a money issue, if it's not costing more money, why isn't it being offered? We're all thinking about it, yes? Super. Okay, so why is trans care different? So these are the statistics that I promised you this afternoon. And they're a little overwhelming. 41% of transgendered persons, so let's just pretend for a second this entire room is trans, okay? 41%, so let's just say this half of the room reports attempting suicide. That is 25 times the national average. Think about that number for a second. It is my best statistics in this presentation. 25 times anything is awful. When we're talking about reporting suicide, we're not talking about being sad and having a really bad Lifetime movie day. We're talking about people that have physically attempted to end their life because of their gender. 19% report being refused medical care. This is from a study that's only 4 years old. 19%. 2% report being assaulted in a doctor's office. In your provider's office. I said the only other thing that's worse, and we talked about it this afternoon, church. Church is that one place where you sort of feel like you're safe for almost anything, regardless of how you identify church and God and your higher power and your spirit. But even in a recent LGBT study that's old, 20+% of them were not welcomed in their place of worship. 20%. Okay, 2.64% have HIV. That is 4 times more than national average of 0.6%. So when we look at HIV, who's my HIV person? You did it. Tell me your name. Justin, you were like, everyone pointed at you this morning for a lot of things. I'm sorry. You were super good. You probably should have Skittles too. But so when we think about this, is the national average still around there somewhere?
The national average?
Yeah, like 0.6-ish.
Yeah.
So think about that. 4 times more. So we look and we go, wow, we think we have a pretty good handle on this disease now, and definitely better than we did 20 years ago when like every gay man in America was dying from it. So look at that, 2.64%. And we think like, oh, 2% isn't bad. 2% is dreadful. That is 4 times the national average, still. And 25% report misusing drugs or alcohol to cope with discrimination. I had a bad day, ate a box of Girl Scout cookies. It's not going to kill me. In the long run, it might affect me. But like on a Thursday, it's probably not that bad. 25% of these people having discrimination every single day and abusing like that every day. What happens? What are we dealing with when we see this population? It's not just about the Bruce Jenners that are out there that have the money and the ways and the means to have this surgery. Okay? Yes, we're good. Any questions so far? Bless you. So we talk about transition itself. Okay, we watched a little bit of that in Eric's video, which is amazing, and he's made my life so much easier tonight. So when we talk about the transition, there's a need for a multidisciplinary approach. So you have all heard us talk about multidisciplinary care. And what do we think about that when we think about that in a regular healthcare system? Who are the players in multidisciplinary care? Let's just say our patient is on the med-surg unit and they're post-rule-out MI. Who are the players on that multidisciplinary team? Your patient is 75 years old. He lives with his wife, his 2 cats, on a multi-level house. Speak up, say it loud, say it proud. Who's OT, PT, psych, social worker, case manager. It's probably a doctor in there taking care of him somewhere. Cardiology, maybe. It's probably a nurse or 12. Okay, so multidisciplinary approach. So if you think about all the people that are needed to take care of your post-MI med-surg patient, you have to take care of these trans patients. Right now, there's like 1, 2, or 3 people that are sort of managing a lot of hats for these patients. Okay, so there's the mental health aspect, which we've talked about. Okay, the WPATH guidelines, which are the previous Harry Benjamin standards, talk about counseling. Talk about counseling these patients, not talking them out of it, just talking them through it. Okay, seeing where they're at, seeing kind of on a scale where everybody's at for that transition. They talk about real life experience. Quinn's going to have to present as female, in theory, if we stick to these guidelines for a year before he can go and have his surgery. And there's not a ton of places that do his surgery. I think the closest, if you're not in the city, is like Bay State Medical out in Springfield, Mass. But yay, Bay State, because you're one of the few in the Boston area that does it. Okay? Colorado, did you do a clinical at Bay State? You're like repping the Bay State Med Center? Outstanding. Go thank them, because they're doing some amazing stuff and have been for a long time. Hormone therapy. So you heard Eric talk about putting hormones in his veins. For Quinn, we would have to do a lot of work. Quinn would look a lot like Laverne Cox if he truly transitioned, because he has a male physique. You're probably over the age of 18. So a lot of your development's been done. Your hormones are fairly well established. You clearly go to the gym. And even though I go to the gym, you and I do not have the same looking arms or physique. So there's going to be a lot of work for you to pull off the Calvin Klein dress and the Liz Claiborne heels if you want to do it the right way. So there's going to be a lot that has to happen for you outside of surgery, the hormone therapy alone. When we think about voice changing, we all think Peter Brady, right? Peter Brady, when it's time to change. Oh, please tell me you've seen the Brady Bunch. Anybody? Thank you. Thank you, ladies on the right. So there's an episode about Peter Brady. He goes through puberty, his voice cracks, okay? So Quinn has a very deep voice. I do not. So if we're going to try and end up being presenting in the same way at some point, Quinn's going to have to change. So he's going to probably have to do some voice coaching. He's going to go on hormones. We don't want you to have to shave every day. That is not pretty nor productive. So we got to do something about that. You're going to want boobs. Who doesn't? You're going to. So we're going to have to do something about that. And then we're going to give you boobs, and then you're still going to have to get them checked. Of course, you bought them. They're yours on Visa, but they're not yours in real life, so you're still going to have to get them checked. So surgery is kind of a big deal, and hormone therapy is a big deal because we are giving you estrogen, which you don't make enough of naturally, because if you did, you would look more like me and less like you. Your transition would be a little easier. So when we think about kids that are transitioning earlier and hormone blocking, okay, and I don't talk a lot about adolescents because it's still a pretty undeveloped field, but there are adolescents that identify really early in a different gender. Boston Children's Hospital, you ever get the opportunity to go work there and you're into peds, please do. They're pretty rock star. They actually have a children's transgender health center there where they're actually doing hormone blocking and early stuff with these kids, because there are some kids, as Oprah has shown us, that identify really early and are pretty concrete. You look at Eric's video, he was 16 when he had his surgery. He knew long before then. You can tell that from his video and from his pictures and from his family. So hormone therapy and surgery. Now surgery for male to female, surgery for female to male, both really involved. If you think about the apparatus that you were born with and then switch it, okay? So you gotta switch all of it. So there are some things that you can do without surgery. Okay, Quinn could go to Victoria's, get himself a Wonder Bra, and rock it. Find a set of heels in a 14, 15, 13. Oh, you got little feet, 11. Okay. You are going to have much easier time getting into shoes then, my friend. So Quinn's going to go out and have to have some challenges there, okay? But the surgery is going to be for men, and we're going to talk about it, and continuing care. So it doesn't end with the surgery. Here's the part that we talked about. So female to male, a lot of them still have their original apparatus. Like Robert, So you still have to get an annual pap smear. You can't just forget it's there, because that's the stuff that kills us when we don't take care of it. So just because you are in a different gender doesn't mean that we don't have to care for the original stuff that's no longer under warranty. And we're mucking around with it a little because we're putting a bunch of hormones. Female males do injectable testosterone daily. Because for as much as Quinn doesn't have to shave every day, Skittles, if you decided to transition, she's in the back, if you decided to transition, you want facial hair desperately. So you're going to take testosterone every day. And it's probably an injection into your leg every day for the rest of your life. That's kind of a big deal. Quinn's taking estrogen every day. You guys can go to a clinic together, but it's daily. You know, Quinn's going to maybe have a tracheal shave because guys have what? Adam's apples. So you know, and this is where we talk about bias and assumptions, you may have seen a client that you're like, I am not sure what is under that gown. I am not sure if that is a male or a female. And the first thing you do is you look at what? The Adam's apple and the hands. Okay? If you're trying to figure it out, you check. Women have much different hands than men for the most part. Quinn's like, look at our hands. Yes, we do. We don't look the same in a lot of ways. And so some things we can't change with surgery. We can't make Quinn 5'2". We can't make me 6'3". So it goes beyond the surgery and the changes like that. So when we think about sort of birth certificates and amended things and marriage and all of that stuff that we take for granted sometimes because of what's on our driver's license, take a look at this. This is not a political party representation, although it's awfully close. So when we look at this, several courts have come to the conclusion that sexual reassignment surgery are not recognized for the purposes of marriage, including courts in Illinois, Texas, and New York. Okay, so in New York, where we live right now, some neat stuff has kind of just happened, actually. But for marriage purposes, even though you have an amended birth certificate, when you go to do your marriage license, they are not willing at this point in time to be flexible on the gender option. And we talked earlier, you think about forms, applications to college, applications to jobs, applications for a credit card, what else? Pretty much anything you'd have to fill your name out for. It's usually for gender. 2. So what happens if it's like 5 years from now and Quinn has been successfully living female? What box does she check? Well, both is confusing to that administrative assistant at the front desk. Both is confusing to the insurance agency. Both is confusing to billing. We need another box. That is correct. Or a line. Fill in the blank. Okay? We are a very label-driven society. We like you to be fat or thin. We like you to be a boy or a girl. We like you to be black or white or some sort of shade in between. We're very label-driven. We like you to be gay or straight. We don't really talk a lot about outside of that. And when we think about culturally competent care, population-focused health, and how we care for our clients in healthcare, we have to think bigger than those very black and white parameters. My goal for you today is to question it all. You will not look at a form the same way after tonight. You may fill out something, and if there's a box and there's only 1 or 2 boxes, you will say, she's totally right. Why aren't there more than 2 boxes? So a patient who's in, let's say this is Quinn next week. He goes to apply for a credit card. He's newly transitioning. He has not had surgery. He's not on hormones. He hasn't changed his name. What box does he check then? It's not as simple as we think it is sometimes. So, there are 4 states that will refuse to change the gender marker on a driver's license after surgery. We'll tell you that none of them are on the East Coast. They are the red states: Idaho, Kansas, Ohio, and Tennessee, for anyone who is as geographically challenged as I am. Those are the red states up on our board. Okay? Now, this year, April, as of April 15, Texas says no. You can't change your gender still. But if the town clerk says you can, and if a judge says you can, you have the right paperwork, and they think that you've satisfied the sexual reassignment surgery question, they will maybe possibly, depending on the day and the clerk, change your license as well. It is not apparently 100% guaranteed that that will happen for you. So, Quinn, don't go there. The purple states do not require sexual reassignment surgery to alter your sex on your birth certificate. Purple. Okay, so let's look where that is. Purple. Not many. So Quinn, you can go to California if you don't want to have surgery, you don't have the money yet. The green states will change your birth certificate, but you gotta have surgery. $60,000+ surgery. Generally not covered by your health insurance. So how often do you think that's happening? Not a lot. Oh, kittens. Okay, so we may not be a provider, we may not be an LGBT provider, but how do we find one? Your friend comes to you and says, oh my God, I totally saw that you tweeted like Lori asked you to. Middle row on your pad right now, tweeting away, I'm sure. If you're Twittering and someone says, hey, I saw you were at that like really awesome lecture, how do I find a provider? I need somebody, because I maybe fall on that rainbow of spectrum. So GLMA, Gay and Lesbian Medical Association.org. GLMA is just in something really neat. They've added a section for nurses, which is amazingly progressive. GLMA is the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association, where providers that either identify on that spectrum or provide care to those patients can list themselves. It's an actual professional organization. They have now added a nursing option, which is awesome, because to the best of my knowledge, there is not a nursing organization that is strictly for this population that does things like education and referrals to providers. You can ask for referrals. Okay, so if you do not provide the services, you're in an office, you're the triage nurse, your client says to you, I think I maybe want to change my gender. You can't say, oh God, nobody here does that. Have a great day. Okay, we have an obligation to our patients. You wouldn't tell your patient, what? Your blood pressure is like 200 over 160. Hope you find somebody that does cardiology. No, we would find them somebody to take care of them. So we have the same sort of duty with these patients. We help for referrals. You can always call the insurance company. Who will treat me? Okay? There's a big list of providers. We don't put a big rainbow flag next to the ones that do LGBT, although we should. Be much easier. But you can call the insurance company. Okay, just like if you were finding a new dentist, you would call and say, hey, I've got Delta Dental, who do you cover? You can do the same thing here. As a patient, you can ask questions. None of you would stay, I would like to think, none of you would stay with a primary care provider if anything in that office made you uncomfortable. Right? We hate blondes. Big anti-blonde thing when you walk in the door. You're not going to go there. Okay? We don't like anybody who wears Nike sneakers. We don't like anybody who's a nurse. Like, whatever the thing is that seems so innocuous. To these patients, that's a really big deal. So we need to create welcoming environments. And granted, I don't need you to start a float in the Pride Parade. I do not need you to be that rah-rah, yay, we're gay person. If you want to be super, call me, I will tell you and help you and mentor you through all of that. However, if you are not that person yet and you just want to provide culturally competent care to your patients, this stuff is important. Talking with providers for patients is also a big deal. There's a huge percentage of our patients that have to educate their providers on how to take care of them. Yes, there's Google. Yes, there's Wikipedia. Yes, there's WebMD. But good Lord, we don't like our regular patients to look at that. We certainly don't want this population to be doing that either, because nobody polices the internet. So anybody can post out there. That's why we don't let you use Wikipedia and research, because it's crap. And anybody can write anything without having valid research to back it up. We're an evidence-based practice and profession. When you go to your clinicals and there are policies in place, you should always be asking, why are we doing this way? And is this the best way to be doing this for our patients? And when you pull the policy manuals, because when you all start getting jobs and when you orient to your clinicals, the first thing they say to you on your scavenger hunt is find the policy book. Well, it used to be a book. Now I think it's probably online. So find the policies online and look them up. Why do we do what we do? Why do we insert a Foley catheter with sterile technique? What do we know about creepy crawlies? Is anybody's parts down there sterile? The answer is no. So we're doing sterile technique on an area that's not sterile. But why? Because there's research that shows us what? Right, infection's kind of a big deal. Right, so we try and decrease that. That's why there's now national guidelines, bless you, put in for reimbursement for Foley catheter. For those of you that are working in healthcare, you know that the doctors are now supposed to be writing orders every 24 hours to validate why that Foley stays in place. Because there was research to support that practice, okay? We want them in, we want them out, we want to decrease the risk of infection, okay? Clotheslines and needle sticks and all of that stuff that we don't do anymore, we don't do because we have research to support that that was not our best practice. We still need to have best practices for this population, okay? We're good? You're following along? We're losing anybody yet? Oh, my Lord. Here we are. So, as a provider, and no, I don't expect that you're all going to medical school, but you are going to be providers. Some of you may go on and get advanced practice nursing degrees. You'll be mid-level providers. Some of you may go and function in a primary health role. Some of you may just actually interact with your patients. You're still a healthcare provider. So when we've talked about this, we've talked earlier this afternoon about it's not necessarily what we say, it's what we're not saying. So these are things you need to think about with every patient. This is not exclusive to this population, but the answers are different and really impact how we provide care. Access to health care. As a provider, okay, if you're working in the ER, we have no idea what somebody's access is other than that they're right there. Do they have physical access? Do they have transportation? Do they have insurance? What's their health history? I shared with the group earlier this afternoon, I had a healthcare provider that took care of me for many years in Cambridge, Massachusetts, very progressive little town right outside of Boston. For years, I would see her every year for my annual exam. And for years, she asked me if I was practicing safe sex. And for years, I would say yes. And then one year, I said no. And then I got a big, huge lecture on how I might end up pregnant and get an STD. And then I said, but don't you want to know who I'm sleeping with? She was like, oh. So she hadn't asked me the important question of who do I, because she was going on and on about condoms when I was partnering with a woman, and condoms were pretty irrelevant at that point in my life. So we have to think about the assumptions that we make. Identity is fluid, okay? People can change who they partner with. So it's important that we don't just say, oh, well, I have seen Susan for 10 years, and Susan was married to Mike, and we don't just assume that that's still a partnership that's happening. So we have to take a really good health history. We have to ask about hormones. Are you on hormones? Are you taking any hormones? That's important. It's important for Quinn, Skittles, the post-hysterectomy person. It's important to know hormones do things to our system that normally we don't do. Cardiovascular health, cancer, STDs and safe sex, alcohol and tobacco, depression, anxiety. Injectable silicone. So injectable silicone is something that I talk about because if you are a male transitioning to female, and you do any research about this, if you don't have a provider that can help you become more feminine in your appearance, sometimes you do an injectable silicone. Black market injectable silicone. Walk into CVS and ask for new needles for that? No, you cannot. So you are going to like a tattoo party essentially, where a bunch of you are sharing needles. So when we see a spike in Hep C, we see a spike in HIV, and we see a spike in what is traditionally reserved for IV drug use, it's because, yeah, you're sharing needles, but not in the way that we think you are, okay? It's an access issue, but it's important to talk about. And it's important to talk about fitness because we talked about those comorbidities earlier. So, when we talk about how to make hospital campuses, and I mean campus like a hospital, not campus like a school, how to be more inclusive for our patients, LGBT, together. Staff awareness and training is huge, and you're seeing a lot of it. I think as you all go out and get jobs, you'll see this. There are cultural competency trainings, and when we think cultural competence, we think about race, we think about religion, we think about dietary restriction. This is kind of a big deal too, okay? So we need to make sure we're including this in our practice. Educational programs, so your hospital may not offer it, but you can come and do things like this all the time. There's online webinars, there's online education, you can come out to speaker programs. That happens and it helps your patients, helps them feel inclusive. Support services, so back to the multidisciplinary care approach, Okay, we want to talk about multidisciplinary care. We want to get a bunch of different people involved, because if we think about that we are more than just our that brings us into our hospital. Okay, we think about what our support system is when we leave. We think about our work. We think about our environment. We have to think about support services to help facilitate those for these patients when they leave as well, because you may get in an absolute mental health crisis because they've just come out to their family and their family kicked them out of the house. Happens all the time. So you've got somebody who's homeless and desperate and depressed, and in your emergency department, you need to get some other people involved, because we can't just discharge that patient home. We have an obligation to provide services for that patient like we would any other, including follow-up and aftercare. Hospital room assignments. So, Quinn breaks his leg like a year from now when she's living fully female. But she hasn't had all of her surgery yet, so her driver's license isn't changed and her insurance card isn't changed. And she's got to stay in the hospital because we've got to put a pin in her. Where do we put her? Who's she getting for a roommate? We don't have a lot of private beds. Where's she going? Is it safe for her if we put her in with Matt? If she's living fully female, but not fully transitioned? Do we open ourselves up to huge liability and risk on the behalf of Matt's family and Quinn's family and the patients and patient safety, knowing that we have a group of patients that have already told us they've been attacked in a provider's office because of their gender? So this doesn't sound like a safe option. We have to think about this. Hospital room assignments become incredibly challenging for healthcare administrators when we have trans patients coming in. Okay, so we have to think about that. Restrooms, we talked earlier. How many do we figure out? The library, gender neutral bathrooms. That doesn't matter where you pee. You're just peeing. Who cares? Gender neutral bathrooms. Counseling and healthcare, we talked about the major depressive issues that this population has. Hospital records and documents. So, if Quinn doesn't have her insurance cards yet that reflect her chosen gender, she's maybe going to have a hard time getting stuff paid for. So what sometimes shows up on our medical records, what sometimes shows up on our college records, sometimes shows up on our ID bracelet that we live off of, that darn ID bracelet, may not reflect how Quinn chooses to identify. We need to ask our patients how they want to be called. We always walk in and say, "Hi, Mrs. So-and-so, how are you today? Hi, Mr. Smith, I'm your nurse, Lori." We need to do better at asking our patients how they want to be called. If patients aren't comfortable, they're not going to correct you. They're just happy you're there to bring them their pain meds or their pitcher of water or turn them or just see how they're doing. But it's really important that we have a rapport with them. They need a safe space. They need to feel comfortable. And sometimes what they want to be called does not reflect what is on that bracelet that is like the be-all, end-all of healthcare. I'm doing much better with time this evening than I was this afternoon. So, the LGBT, it does not stand for Life Gets Better Together, but it kind of does. Okay? It is, what? Oh, not me. So, it is, life gets better together. It is important that we take care of this population. They have really specific needs that we need to do a better job at taking care of. It would be awesome, like I said, if I don't ever have to give this lecture 5 years from now. But I'd love to open the floor to questions. If anyone has questions about this, about the afternoon conversation, because I know we ran late with that when we were talking about cultural competence. I'm going to check the Twitter and see if anybody's tweeting to talk to us. Yes?
So if insurance companies aren't covering like for surgeries and things like that, how does hormone therapy work? Do they cover the cost of that?
Okay, so the question is if insurance companies aren't covering, what happens? So sometimes insurance companies will cover some part. Medically necessary is a very important. Okay, the American Medical Association has come on board. We talk about gender identity disorder, GID, it is in the DSM-4. Okay, it is a diagnostic code for anybody that doesn't know what the DSM-4, now 5, is. But so yes, for some patients, if they are being seen at the health center with a provider that specializes in sexual reassignment surgery, they have their health insurance to approve the hormone therapy if it is medically necessary. And the providers, health centers that we talked about are incredibly creative with getting that covered, as are some others as well. And by and large, it is not covered.
For natal men that are transitioning, why don't they take the prostate out?
Would we take your appendix out, even though it doesn't really do much when it's not working just fine? It's not considered essential surgery.
Can you ask for it while they're in there?
Well, you might, but you could have a C-section and ask for a tummy tuck. They're not doing that either. So they're probably not doing unnecessary surgery. Well, yes, unless you're out at Sinai on the West Coast. So they usually leave it in there just like they do with women. They don't necessarily do a hysterectomy when they do sexual reassignment surgery either, because there are risks that are always associated with surgery.
Would that change if they have a family history of prostate cancer?
I think it would change. So the question was, would it change if they had a prostate cancer family history? It may. What they have found is that some of the hormones actually increase the risk of cancers because of the nature of the hormones. So it might, and I think it would probably be incredibly provider specific as well. But I think it would probably just be like any other male that presents as male that has a family history of prostate. They don't necessarily remove that, just like in women, they don't even do routine testing for family history, not always with the BRCA.
The 14 locations that you talked about, are those only outpatient settings? Or
They are. They are 14 so the question was, are they only outpatient settings? They are 14 LGBT healthcare clinics, freestanding clinics.
so there are more hospitals that offer care?
There are more hospitals that don't deny care. There is no specific LGBT hospital in the United States. But Bay State Medical do sexual reassignment surgery. They have physicians there. Colorado has a physician that is actually known for her sexual reassignment surgery. Canada also has sexual reassignment surgery specialists. Because if you're going to have this surgery done, you better bet Quinn's probably willing to travel to have someone get it right the first time.
I just asked because I've had a transgender patient in clinical setting.
Yep.
Here.
Yep, so yes, they will be treated in a healthcare center, but sexual reassignment surgery is usually only done where there's a practicing physician that is comfortable with sexual reassignment surgery. It's specialized training, just like using a Da Vinci robotic machine. There's actual specialized training for that surgery. It's not just plastics, unfortunately. Urogynecology is usually involved. If you think about having to reroute Quinn's plumbing so that he can still pee after we give him this beautiful designer vagina, urology's got to be involved to make sure everything goes where it needs to go now. So plastics is involved because we want it to look pretty and work well. So yes, there's a big team that's involved in this surgery. And what we have found is that patients actually go out of the country to have the surgery because it is cheaper in Canada and in China and in Mexico. But we're also finding is that these patients are doing surgeries and quick recovery times and then getting back on a plane and coming back with huge medical complications that need to be dealt with by providers here once they get back stateside. Other questions?
Are there medical issues that patients could have that could cause them not to transition?
You mean like that it wouldn't be safe to sexual reassignment transition or hormones or both? So yes, so anytime, so when we think about, we all have estrogen and testosterone in our system, male or female, just different balances. It's how we usually present as more masculine and more feminine sometimes. So yes, there are complications that would say, you know what, going on hormone therapy is actually not really recommended for you because of either your family history with breast cancer or anything that a hormone into your system would actually expedite a negative comorbidity.
Interesting stuff in the demographics. At what age typically are people making the decision to transition?
So her question is at what age? So it's for surgery, the demographic tends to be over the age of 30. Usually, what the data shows is not just because of the coming out process and being comfortable in that. It is absolutely a financial issue, unfortunately. But we are seeing younger children who are really struggling with their identity and are transitioning earlier with things like hormone blockers. So not doing surgery per se, but 8, 9, 10-year-olds that we're doing sort of precocious puberty. We try and stop the puberty so that they have less female and male characteristics in their birth gender so that if they are going to transition, it is an easier transition than somebody like Quinn, who's in his 20s, who's going to try and do it now, looking very male and having to try and change all of that. But yeah, the demographic sort of looks like, now somebody had said to me, wow, it's really great that your topic is trendy. I said, oh, trendy, skinny jeans are trendy. This is relevant. So it's not necessarily trendy, but we are seeing more people being open with expressing their gender. And I think it is because we've become a society that's a little more accepting, so it's a little safer, even though the demographics and data look a little different. I think that we've created an environment, sometimes with safer schools and with more acceptance, and generationally speaking, I think, that people feel safer coming out in a gender and maybe are not necessarily having surgery, but are definitely presenting in a chosen gender a lot earlier than they would have. We had talked earlier about, and at dinner, about elders in LGBT care. And I had originally looking at the older population of transgender patients, but they don't exist on paper because back in the day, this wasn't an okay thing to do. It wasn't safe. So once patients transitioned, they went what's called stealth. They just lived in their gender, and that was it. And so it was almost like, I think it was you that said, it was almost like being the witness protection plan. You got a new name, you got a new identity, you relocated, you disappeared. I met somebody at a conference, he worked for the VA, and he had a veteran that he was working with. She was a 40-year veteran of the military. She was married, she had a husband, she had kids, he had children from the previous relationship. She was in the VA hospital in upstate New York, like towards Canada, New York, and she had prostate cancer because she was born male and transitioned, lived her life fully female, including her service to our country. No one knew, including her husband, that she was born male. So now you've got a patient in the hospital who's got prostate cancer because she has a prostate. And we have HIPAA regulations that say we can't talk about that outside of the confines of our job. So that staff could not tell her husband, could not tell her children, weren't supposed to talk about it themselves. And what they had to do was they had to work it up like it was ovarian cancer because they needed to keep this patient safe and still treat her to kill that cancer and sort of justify surgery and radiation in an area that looked like her ovary even though we were getting to her prostate. That was just a couple of years ago. So that population kind of has disappeared. There's not a lot of data on the older transgender population because I think they came out, they didn't really come out, they just went out and disappeared and sort of just lived in society. And I think now we have a much more accepting culture, even though we're not where we need to be. I think it's safer for people to come out now and younger and sort of live in that sort of rainbow coalition that we all sort of talked about.
Females, do we have any?
Say that again?
I said more males or females?
So Healthy People 2020, one of their markers is that we want to get more data on this population. The data that's been done and gathered and the people that have responded to that predominantly is male to female, is who's been responding to the surveys, to the data, to the research, to the census. So the hope with Healthy People 2020 is to actually get a clearer picture of what the trans population looks like in the US, but also to get more data on the female to male population. But yeah, predominantly most of the research is male to female. And they don't know why. They have no concrete reasoning behind that. They just know that that's what the numbers show. Other questions? Yes?
I'm seeing that they are actually using the transgender topic on soap operas.
And everywhere. Great.
So I was curious to see the way it's being portrayed accurate.
Yes and no. So
Since, is it a little exploited? How it is.
it is a little. So when we think back, so she's talking about transgender being portrayed on soap operas. So when we think back to, and most of you may not remember this, but Ellen DeGeneres used to have a television show before she had her speaking talk show. She actually had a sitcom. And in the show, it was always sort of alluded that Ellen was gay. Now, Ellen DeGeneres has been gay probably since more than most of you were born. And Ellen never had a boyfriend on the show, on the sitcom, and she was one of the writers. Her brother was a producer. And when she decided she was going to come out on that show, there was such a hoopla that they actually ended up canceling the show shortly thereafter. Now, if you're going to come out on your show, you might as well do it like Ellen did. She had the most iconic lesbians in the world on that episode. She had on the sitcom. She had Katie Lang on the sitcom. If you don't know Katie Lang is a singer, presents very masculine, identifies as female. She probably had Leah Delaria. Now, Leah Delaria is on Orange is the New Black. Leah plays the very butch lesbian. That is Leah's every day. That is not an acting stretch for her at all. She has been like that for years. She has written a number of papers on how she herself has been mistreated in physicians' offices because of the way that she presents and she identifies as a lesbian. So she doesn't want to be a man, she doesn't want to change her gender, but she presents, and people make assumptions because she wears that very short hair and has that very masculine physique. But they were all on Ellen's episode. I think we do a better job with it now. When Transamerica won a bunch of awards at the awards this year, it was a really big deal. And it's a really great show if you haven't seen it. Great thing that's happening. Orange is the New Black is great. Laverne Cox is doing amazing things and is very outspoken in the community. I think they're doing a better job with it. And I think it depends on who's writing and producing it.
Well, I think of it because of the negative image of nursing the way it's portrayed on television. I'm just curious to see.
That is one of my things. When I always say, like, when we think about nurses, I think there are more adult films about nurses than any other profession. And you all know what I'm talking about. You all just got that image in your head of the nurse with the dress and the bedside manner. Right. For Lord's sake, I am covered in other people's bodily fluids more by 9 a.m. than ever in those portrayals. And we talked earlier about the culture of nursing. We have a culture. That is part of our culture. That is the history that brought us to where we are now. So I think there's a better job. And I think that the more that people are aware of it, even with the Bruce Jenner / Kardashians of the world, I still think it's a positive thing. We have a lot of assumptions that we make about people, and sometimes we only know what we portray. We did an exercise this afternoon where we did some role playing, and everybody sort of just closed their eyes and listened to me talk for a couple of minutes, and we talked about what if, like, every movie you saw had a bunch of gay actors. Like, we'll just every movie you saw had a bunch of gay actors playing gay roles. All you could ever see was gay movie. Gay, 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 gay. And every now and then there was a straight person thrown in there, and they were either crazy or depressed or like a sociopath. That's not the norm, but that is sometimes how this population gets portrayed. So I think we're doing a better job at it. I still think we have a long way to go. And so, sort of close this morning's session by saying you have the opportunity as the nurses of the future to think about how we give care, how we give it competently, how we give it culturally sensitive to this population. I don't expect you all to run out and go work down at Fox's Wellness Center. I don't. If you do, super, call me, I will write you a letter of recommendation. But I think that being aware of our clients, just like we would always think when we have a foreign-speaking patient who's on our floor, and we always want to know where the interpreter phone is or what interpreter is coming in so that we can make sure we communicate with those patients, these patients are no different. We just need to make sure that we're sensitive to what they're doing and what they need, and that we're providing them the most competent care in the best way possible. You have the opportunity to do that. Every patient should be the sort of same assessment when they walk in the door, regardless of what their orientation is, regardless of what their gender is, regardless of how they got there. Good takeaway? Any questions? Thank you very much. It has been an amazing day. They may go with God now. Drive safely. Are they dismissed?
They are.
You are dismissed. Thank you for an awesome day today here at Hartwick.
Oh my God!
Oh, I heard my name.
I did not call your name.
Someone called my name. I don't know where it came from.
Hi. I met you earlier.
Yes.
My name is Rachel.
I'm
Very
still
nice
Lori.
to meet you. I'm actually looking at studying, majoring in gender studies.
Okay.
I'm not a nursing student. But
Do they have gender studies here? It's an independent study.
SUCO
Okay.
would be. I'll let you talk to them first.
Okay.
We're from SUNY Delhi, so we just
Hi, folks. Hi, people. They want me to come work here. They're like, you should come talk to us. I'm like, I don't think I can do that in your RN program.
as much.
No, I make craptastic pay in my program, but I love it. I love my job. I love Mary Pat. I would never leave Mary Pat unless Mary Pat Lewis dies. I'm not going anywhere.
We tell her she's not allowed to retire. That's what we tell her.
To go anywhere.
Well, when I saw Candace retiring, I'm like, you don't want Candace's job, right? Because that would be really,
yeah.
We already
really bad. Oh, I looked right at her at site visit. Was like, you can't go. Like that's bad for a number of reasons. I love that you guys came though. Thank you.
Well, I'm Rhonda.
Oh my gosh, I think we had a site visit like for like. Bye. Thank you.
And this is Donna cutting. So.
Oh my gosh, I see your name on 700 emails. Ray wants his stuff. Ray wants his toy.